10 is the time. A very good morning to you. And where, I wonder, to begin? Can you turn it off and on again? Do you think? Would that work? That should be Keir Starmer's policy regarding the dreaded B word. And we're going to turn it off. We are going to turn it off and then turn it on again. You may think that I'm making this up, but you should know by now I never make stuff up, unless I tell you in advance that I'm making stuff up, or I'm playing a trick on Theo Usherwood. But the Daily Telegraph, no less, the sort of house journal, I've said it before and I shall say it again, the Daily Telegraph is to Boris Johnson as the Beano is to Dennis the Menace. And the Daily Telegraph this morning carries a story, you don't need to read it, under the headline, "Time is running out to prove Brexit is not a historic failure." I took a decision about halfway through last year to confine most of my newspaper references regarding the dreaded B word to newspapers that were absolutely tireless cheerleaders for it at the time of the referendum and in the 4 years immediately afterwards. Well, the 5 years, basically the 5 years up until it happening. They were full-throated and tireless cheerleaders. So the Daily Express has been dropping some headlines that make me do a double take. So close to the truth are they finally becoming, and so completely at loggerheads, completely at odds with what they said was going to happen is now going to happen. I mean, just by way of example, if you were looking at politicians instead of newspapers, do you remember Rees-Mogg and the rest of them queuing up to tell you that your energy prices and your food prices would be lower after Brexit? Is that a penny drop moment? Is that a little sort of breakthrough minute? I do not know. But the Daily Telegraph carrying that headline today. And Keir Starmer's speech yesterday, and I think today is one of those days where you realise just how daft most of the British media is. The Daily Mail has rapidly returned to the absolutely bonkers position it was in under the editor before the last editor. It changed editors just before Christmas, and the previous regime is now firmly back in charge, which means you've got all sorts of non-stories and nonsenses populating its pages, and none of them really looking at either the B word or the speech from the leader of the opposition yesterday. There's an attempt to sort of make it... It wasn't a brilliant speech because he's not a brilliant speaker, but it was interesting. And in a fair universe, in a balanced universe, it would be getting at least as much coverage of the press conference from the Prime Minister in which the Prime Minister said precisely nothing. I shall share my thoughts with you before close of play today on what Boris Johnson's current mindset is. Already described by the satirical website The Poke as being absolutely bang on the money. It was a prediction, a description, an explanation that I offered up before the press conference actually occurred. But once again, as the Cassandra de nos jours, every syllable of it was proven true by the Prime Minister once he opened his gob. But it is this notion of making Brexit work that intrigues me the most, because it's upset people alongside whom I marched during the failed attempts to get a second referendum. And I don't know who it is designed to attract. Keir Starmer is currently polling in the so-called red wall, or rather Boris Johnson is currently polling in the so-called red wall, roughly where Theresa May was during the very, very worst days of her premiership. I think I saw somewhere Keir Starmer 16 points ahead on personal polling in those constituencies. So it's not going well, and yet for the first time since the referendum happened, I'm not quite sure what to do. There you go. You can accuse me of many things, but you can't accuse me of not being honest with you. For the very first time since the referendum, I'm not quite sure what to do. I realised pretty quickly where the traffic was going, how awful it was going to be. I tried my hardest to give people an opportunity to measure twice, cut once, as Jacob Rees-Mogg himself called for, to have an opportunity to have another referendum once the terms of leaving had been established, once they'd been made clear, once we knew what the, quotes, deal, end quotes, would be. There's an irony there, isn't there, when you think that the bloke that negotiated the deal not only tried to disown it within months of putting pen to paper, but has now walked away, has now run away. Brave Sir David ran away. And you know, well, not Sir David, is he? Brave Lord Frost ran away. And that tells you all you need to know about the deal that you never got a chance to vote on. And I saw it coming. I saw it coming a mile off, and a lot of people did. I've got no beef with people that didn't. No beef at all. As you know, my contention for a long time has been contempt for the con men, compassion for the conned. But the question of what the opposition do, what does Keir Starmer do, is one which I am glad I don't have to answer, or at least I'm glad my livelihood doesn't depend upon it. I speak, and you'll allow me a moment of arrogance, I speak as someone in the process of being proven absolutely and incontrovertibly right about everything from import-export right through to the situation in Northern Ireland and the clash between the Good Friday Agreement and membership or non-membership of the single market. There is, and you may not believe me, there's no pleasure in it whatsoever, because another word Keir Starmer used in his speech yesterday, patriotism. Patriotism involves feeling awful when your country inflicts damage upon itself. Patriotism involves wanting the best for your neighbours and your friends, your colleagues and your co-workers, and also complete strangers who happen to live on the same islands that you live on. And the idea that we've turned those islands into the first territory in the history of humanity to impose economic sanctions upon itself really upsets me. And obviously I'm quite well insulated from a lot of these impacts by dint of the fact that I earn a very good crust. I make no apology for that, but it means that attempt to portray people like me as metropolitan elites when we knew that we'd be better off than the people hit hardest. More research shows that the parts of the country that voted leave are likely to bear the worst of the economic brunt of Brexit. And I knew that as well, because I just read about it and I strove to understood it. And I looked at the people who you were being asked to trust. I looked at the Farages and the Rees-Moggs and the Johnsons and the Francois and the Brexit hard man Steve Bakers and the Nadine Dorrieses. And I just thought, no way. There's just no way on God's green earth that they understand complicated issues better than people like Sir Paul Nurse, the head of the Royal Society, Mark Carney, the then Governor of the Bank of England, or every living Prime Minister this country has ever had. There's just no way they've got a better grasp of the facts than John Major and Tony Blair, you know, or Gordon Brown, or the Governor of the Bank of England. So I don't know what to do next. I really don't. I didn't realise that that's where we were going to go this morning. I thought I was just going to do a little bit of a spiel on Keir Starmer's speech yesterday, throw the phrase "make Brexit work" into the air, ask what it meant to you, and then ask how it landed with you in terms of electoral possibilities. But I don't know what I'm going to do next. I don't think, for the record, that campaigning to rejoin the European Union would be a very good idea at the moment. I'm pretty confident. So let's actually try and work out what I think. I don't think campaigning to rejoin would be a good idea. And you may not like, if you're still clinging to the carcass of Brexit. So just read this out quickly. If you weren't listening last year, it may need a bit of explanation. James needs to shout "I told you so" at the top of his voice and then put 100 quid in Keith's tin. Remind me to explain that to you later if you don't know what I'm talking about or what that texter is talking about. The reason why I don't think that campaigning to rejoin the European Union for the Labour Party or any other, maybe for the Liberal Democrats, because they come from a slightly different angle, don't they? It wouldn't be a very good idea because so many people are still clinging to the carcass of the idea that it was a good idea or that it was going to bring benefits or that it was sunlit uplands or that we held all the cards. And they're clinging to it furiously, not just with, not even with political fingers anymore, but with psychological and emotional fingers. And they're not going to let go. They can't let go. It's become part of their identity, which is a tragedy for them, but also, of course, for the rest of us, because it means that we have to carry on. I think, this is my opinion, and you are, as ever, welcome to start picking holes in it before I finish speaking. 0345 60 60973. I think, so number one, we have to press on for now. We have to carry on with it. Number two, which is part of number one, we can't campaign to rejoin. The country's not ready yet. You need another 2-3 years of reality, and then you need probably a 10-year process, and then you've got the horrible prospect of the terms of rejoining being inferior to the terms that we had before we left, on issues particularly of the single currency and possibly even Schengen. But let's not jump off that bridge until we come to it. So that's all I've got. We have to press ahead with Brexit. It would be madness, electoral madness for Keir Starmer to suggest in any way stopping or reversing it. And that means we can't campaign to rejoin. Why? Because, and this might be wrong, be fascinating to hear from people who did vote for it. Why can Keir Starmer not do that? Even though obviously intellectually he knows it would be the right thing to do. Answer, because the country has been groomed into a point of intellectual corruption and ideological idiocy that sees millions and millions of people still in thrall to the largely xenophobic notion that we're better off out than in. So what does he do? Answer, he campaigns, he promises to make Brexit work. Now, I quite like the cut of Keir Starmer's jib so far. I don't know whether he'd take this as a compliment, but I relish dullness after the last few years. I'd quite like someone relatively dull. I get the chance to interview him for the first time on stage, actually, in Leicester Square at the end of February. And I'm looking forward to it because I want to know whether in person there's a little bit more sparkle than I've yet detected on screen or in Parliament or on the radio when he appears with Nick. But I don't know what that means. Make Brexit work. I don't know what it means. And I don't know what success would look like. And that is where I think we'll start today. 10:15 is the time. Let's not go in too deep. I'm a little bit surprised by where that introduction went, that idea that I don't know what to do next. I mean, there's a temporary holding pattern there. There's a holding position. And I think it's probably the same as Keir Starmer's. We cannot campaign to rejoin because it's so toxic and the country remains so divided and people are still clinging to the carcass of what they were flogged by Farage and Rees-Mogg and the rest of the shysters and charlatans behind Vote Leave and Leave EU. So, and that's not an insult to you or a criticism. I get it. You know, we've all in our time bought stuff and then regretted it shortly afterwards. But what does make Brexit work mean? Hit the numbers now, you will get through. What does make Brexit work mean? But the easier question to answer is, what do you think of it as a policy position, as a platform? So Keir Starmer's commitment regarding the single biggest peacetime issue to face this country is make Brexit work. It's not working. Even the Daily Telegraph and the Daily Express are admitting that now. You will have your professional hecklers, your tomato throwers, who run a million miles when they're charged with anything remotely resembling reality. Your Farages, of course, who just throwing rotten tomatoes from the audience and then fall apart like the cheapest of suits if they ever end up close to the stage, where they generally get beaten by sharks. Or men dressed as sharks in elections. So they've already started complaining about it. Nobody's happy. But Keir Starmer is promising to make it work. So the A-stream question... I can't do that, can I? That's like... Well, all right, I will do that. The A-stream question is, what would that look like? I can't answer that, so I'm not in A-stream today. The B-stream question is, what do you think of that? Straight up, as a voter... Or a trader, make Brexit work. That's the platform. What do you think of it? I'm really looking forward to this conversation, and I can't wait to hear what you've got to say. 0345 6060 973 is the number you need to tell me. 20 minutes after 10 is the time. Let's crack straight on. Make Brexit work, says Keir Starmer. What does that mean? And less taxingly, perhaps, on the little grey cells, because, as I think yesterday's first 20 minutes or so of the programme demonstrated, you come out of the traps a little bit slowly if you've had a splendid Christmas. Less taxingly. What do you think of that? What do you think of that plus Starmer? Make Brexit work as a slogan plus Starmer equals what? Cora is in Harrow. Cora, what would you like to say?
Hi, James.
Hello, Cora.
I'm going to try to speak fast because I know a lot of people want to talk to you.
No, don't speak fast because I'm not back quite in full gear yet, so I won't be able to keep up. Take your time.
All right. So basically, I think I'm 100% rejoin.
Sure. Rejoin? Okay.
Yes, nothing in the world I want more than a United States of Europe. I think it'd be awesome. However, I think, as you said towards the end of your, before the break, the conversation is way too toxic at the moment for Labour to be trying to wade in again and trying to take up positions. They did so badly last time at it. So let's just chill for a bit.
Well, they didn't have a position last time. I know everyone agrees, yes, they did, but the voters didn't know what it was, and the widespread suspicion was that the leader of Labour going into the last general election actually was in favour of Brexit.
Yeah, whereas, I mean, Keir Starmer, we know he isn't. We know it. So this whole idea that he's sort of like flipped in the last 6 months, all of a sudden he had some massive changes, just not practical.
But the same with Theresa May, though. I mean, you know, she. I know it didn't go well for her necessarily, but she did win an election, and she was a former Remainer. So Starmer understands it. No one ever accused Jeremy Corbyn of understanding anything. So he understands Brexit, but he also understands, and again, no one ever accused Jeremy Corbyn of this. He understands what needs to be done to be in with a chance of winning elections.
Exactly. And this is why I mean, I've been a massive, sort of campaigner for, not a massive campaigner, but for a progressive alliance or democratic alliance, I don't care what you call it, as well as PR. And I actually think those kinds of massive electoral reforms are going to be necessary before the EU can look at us and think, oh, okay, they're not
because we're presuming the door would be open. So
exactly.
I sense you're going to have a go at the second question, which is, what do you think of Make Brexit Work? Starmer plus slogan equals what? Because I don't know that either of us yet could answer the question of what making Brexit work is going to look like, but you can try if you want.
I think Make Brexit Work is, it allows him to sort of leave the door open to both sides.
Yeah.
And I actually think it's a really good sort of middle ground, because it doesn't necessarily mean making hard Brexit work. Doesn't necessarily mean rejoin either.
Does it give him the chance almost to be all things to all people? So you and I think see it as make the best of a bad lot.
Yeah, and that might mean closer alignment.
Yes.
Or it could mean something else. But I think this is what we have to... And also another thing, just because I've been learning a lot of economics over the last 5 years.
It'll never catch on.
Rejoining the EU is kind of like an inevitability for us. The world that we operate in,
or at least rejoining, it could be EEA or EFTA. We could be like Norway or Switzerland, but rejoining. So, yeah.
Absolutely. The gravity model of international trade dictates that we have a better relationship with our closest partners.
Yes.
What we've done here in trying to deviate away from that and trying to create some new special type of model is ridiculous. It's not going to work. We're going to have to be closer to Europe, because they're our biggest and closest trading partner. It's just economic common sense.
And that penny needs to drop from a great height still for some people, and to try to win or any rejoin platform before that penny has dropped would be, I think, electorally very, very foolish. Although we obviously sing from similar hymn sheets, I will, as ever, on the programme. And I hope today you feel a little more welcome than perhaps you have over the last few years. If you voted to leave, I'd love to know what you think about Make Brexit Work as a slogan. Because the minute I say to someone like Cora, make the best of a bad lot, there could be the game is up for Keir Starmer, because you'll think, oh, so he thinks it's a bad lot. So he's trying to appeal to people who know that it's stupid, and also not alienate people who still pretend that or genuinely believe that it isn't. And I mean, that's a tricky trick. I nearly said that. That's a tricky trick. That is like riding two horses at the same time, which, if you've ever been to a circus, you'll know is not impossible. Cora, thank you. Ben's in Brighton. Ben, what would you like to say?
Belated Happy New Year to you first, John.
And to you, Ben.
I'd just like to say I like the slogan.
Do you?
And I like it primarily because I think he's getting at perhaps something like rejoining the customs union, which in my view would at least sort out the problems between this country, Northern Ireland, and Europe. That would be a huge, huge and important thing. If he was really brave, he might make moves to rejoin the single market as well, which would sort out the supply chain issues we've got at the moment. And I think if that's kind of what he's got in mind, I know that there will be a lot of levers that will characterise that as pretty much rejoin. But I do remember Boris Johnson saying no one is talking about leaving the single market. I do remember Nigel Farage continuously going on about the Norway model. Yeah. So these things...
I don't know that matters. I mean, you and I know that, but I mean, what they said and what they are being held to are two completely different things, all of them. I mean, from Johnson down. That's the mad thing about it. It's not just the complete sort of people who should never have been allowed into the main event like Nigel Farage, but it's the people who were in charge of the main event like Boris Johnson. The gulf between what they said, even the strange chap who is political editor of The Sun picked him up on the VAT promises yesterday. So, I mean, it's literally fallen apart already completely. But no one's really holding them. Voters aren't holding them to promises that they made. So I don't know that matters particularly.
Maybe it doesn't, but I do think that the problems in Northern Ireland, which I just think could get far worse. And I think if Johnson feels as though he's in a lot of trouble, he might just do something bonkers like trigger Article 16.
Well, but then the whole deal's off. Again, this is something we suffer from only reading about through the lens of British media, because, you know, if the European Union responded to the triggering of Article 16, then the bad situation that we're already in would get immeasurably worse. So here's the thing, isn't it? I'm just trying to pin down the horn of the dilemma. He needs to. So I think most Remainers are not going to be, or former Remainers are not going to be alienated by Make Brexit Work. I think the campaign to rejoin is, I think, a way off yet.
I agree with you.
And so the question is, does this offer enough to either the Leavers who have seen the light, which might be enough to win an election, and even better from his point of view, the Leavers who haven't seen the light yet and think that Brexit is a good idea, but they must now be beginning to realise it's not going terribly well.
I think if you're a fisherman or a farmer and you're thinking about how to get your goods quickly into the EU, which is obviously, what matters is having markets, not the amount of fish you can catch, but the amount of fish you can sell. If it's presented to you as, look, we can allow you to actually sell more fish and sell all kinds of agricultural goods, and indeed any other kind of goods into Europe by making Brexit work, but we will not be rejoining, and you keep stating we will not be rejoining, that could actually be quite compelling to Leavers. I
think you might be right. And do you know that poor woman in Lowestoft, whose name I can never remember, June Mummery, still on Twitter over Christmas in response to a tweet from Carl Turner, the MP for Hull, who obviously has a fishing constituency. She's still not understanding, bless her, that point you just made, and that it doesn't matter how much fish you can catch. It's all about
unless you plan to eat them all yourself.
It's exactly that. It's all about how much fish you can sell and where you can sell it. But I think she's an example, perhaps, of someone who's never going to see the madness of what she campaigned for and, of course, persuaded other people to vote for. It's all Boris Johnson's fault now that Brexit's going so badly. It's taken less than a year to go from King Brexit, who got Brexit done, to it's all his fault it's going so badly. I knew there'd be a circular firing squad, and I knew I wouldn't enjoy it. But I didn't think it would come either this quickly or be this complete. But here we are. It's coming up to 10:29. Great stuff from Ben. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC, where we turn our attention to Keir Starmer. Perhaps I'm not a great believer in dead cats. In fact, one of my New Year's resolutions, my only New Year's resolution so far, is not to attribute anything, if I can avoid it, to dead cats, deliberate attempts at distraction. But I don't think it's beyond the realms of possibility that Boris Johnson's decision to have a press conference yesterday in which he announced precisely nothing, absolutely nada, zilch, diddly squat. Any more adjectives for zero? Zero. I don't think it would be beyond the realms of possibility that it was at least influenced in part by the fact that Keir Starmer gave a speech yesterday that did contain some substance. And that substance, for want perhaps of a better word, included the slogan, Make Brexit Work. What does it mean to you? 0345 6060 973. How has it landed with you? And what would it look like? So far, the suggestion is that it would have to involve a softening or indeed an erasing of Theresa May's red lines. And I think at this point, half an hour into the programme, I'm inclined to agree with that. Time now for the very latest headlines with Thomas Watts. 10:33 is the time. I've got a horrible feeling. This was one of my New Year's resolutions last year on the programme, and I didn't fulfil it necessarily to maximum capacity, but remember Scotland in these discussions as a distinct and significant equal entity, because Make Brexit Work in Scotland is a very different proposition, I imagine, to Make Brexit Work in England. Already someone has picked me up, a couple of people have picked me up on this. In discussing parties that should campaign to rejoin the EU, you ignored the third party at Westminster, James, the SNP. Yet you mentioned the Lib Dems, a party with 1/3 of the number of MPs. Also, Remain Voting Scotland stands to be as badly hit, if not more badly hit, as Leave Voting Red Wall Northern England by being outside the EU single market. Nicely put, my apologies. And Mikey takes up the point. James, Rejoin may be toxic for Labour to say, but that's very England-centric. Keep in mind that the slogan Make Brexit Work is toxic in Scotland. Glancing at my screen, I've got Bracknell, Sudbury, Leeds, Clacton, Hexham, Woking, Liskeard and elsewhere queuing up to talk to me, but nobody currently in Scotland. Let's rectify that, please, on 03456060973. How does Make Brexit Work reach Scottish ears? 10:34 is the time. Richard is in Bracknell. Richard, what would you like to say?
Well, I want to start off by saying that I was one of these Remainers that was quite angry with, the whole Make Brexit Work thing from Starmer. But
yes, OK.
I'm beginning to think he's actually stumbled on something really quite clever.
Oh, good.
If you think about Brexit, and it was sold very, very much on a sort of emotional thing.
It was.
And you look at the areas like the Red Wall.
Yes.
What Johnson did was use a technique which they use in sales, which is called the takeaway. Now, what you do is you threaten to take something away from people, and then they grab it and they really want it. They don't necessarily know what it is, but they know that if you want to take it away from it, it must be something worth having. So I think that if he campaigned to rejoin, Johnson would actually be able to say
they're taking it away from you. He's still yes, I think you're absolutely. Oh, I love this. Carry on.
Okay, so quite cleverly, Johnson has sort of shot himself in the foot because he claims to have got Brexit done. He's taken away his trump card.
You can never take away something that has been permanently delivered.
Yeah. So I think the clever thing to do...
Well, that's why he has to avoid Rejoin like the plague, isn't it? That's why the vaguest suggestion of Rejoin reopens the door to the takeaway, to Johnson to say he wants to stop it, he wants to reverse it, he wants to take it away from you. That's the best explanation so far, much better than mine. He cannot open the Rejoin door because of the takeaway principle of selling.
Yep.
Love it.
So,
love it.
Well, I think the first thing what he needs to do is to try and get away from the most toxic parts of Brexit, and that's the disaster capitalist thing. So things like the effluent going into rivers, nobody wants that. We don't want lower food standards. We don't want our farmers impoverished.
Yeah, it might be too late for that, particularly.
And we don't want the privatisation of the NHS.
OK.
So I think a campaign based on the line something like Brexit doesn't have to mean, and then insert any of those things in there, would get the Tories on the absolute back foot.
Brexit doesn't have to mean, what's the polite word? Crap in our rivers, right?
Yep.
Brexit doesn't have to mean privatising the NHS. Brexit doesn't have to mean the rich getting richer. Brexit doesn't have to mean a decline in your food standards. Brexit doesn't have to mean British farmers being kiboshed by Australian farmers. All of these things. That's strong, actually, Richard.
So then you get into a position where the Tories can't defend that. We can realign. And then the clever thing about this is once you get the toxicity out of it, then the Tustin Street people will have no interest in it at all. And it will fall apart from both sides. Well,
I mean, the elephant in the room, or rather the absence of an elephant in the whatever that means, is the media, isn't it? Because, I mean, your message very neatly explained, beautifully explained, if you allow me to say so. You're currently top of the class, Richard, top of the A stream. But the problem is, of course, that you'll open up many newspapers or turn on many broadcasts and you'll hear people continuing to punt unicornism. But that probably has to stop at some point, doesn't it? Because people are going to see the prices in supermarkets. They're going to see the cost of energy. They're going to see the reality, energy not directly linked to Brexit, but they're going to see the reality of what they've done. They're going to see more red tape on importing and exporting. They're going to see even the racists who voted for fewer brown faces are going to see that we're offering easier visa terms to India now, perhaps, in pursuit of trade deals. So no one's going to be happy eventually, at which point the media will have to stop selling them the Kool-Aid, I hope.
You see, I think the other thing that you can do is that you can sort of twist that emotion and that takeaway the other way around. You can then say, look, if you say things, for example, like Brexit doesn't have to mean the privatisation of the NHS, or Brexit doesn't have to mean the lowering of food standards.
Yeah, you're doing the reverse psychology. It's almost you're doing the takeaway, aren't you?
So you could then say,
I feel like I'm at a seminar. I feel like I'm at a sales seminar, Richard, with you. Have you got a PowerPoint presentation to go along with this contribution to the programme?
I could probably do one. But I think that you could switch it on its head, and it might be a little bit dishonest, but we're dealing with dishonesty anyway. But what you could then say is you know what? I'm going to go to Brussels, and I'm going to ensure that I get a deal where we don't have to lower our food standards.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, better late than never. It would be the argument. I don't even think it's dishonest. You just mean there'd be a little bit of brinksman salesmanship going on, but it would still be delivering what you're promising to deliver, which is the polar opposite of what the other lot did. And speaking of the other lot, just mentioning, I think we've definitely got a bit of Rees-Mogg, for which I can only apologise. I think we've got a bit of Hannan. Do you remember him? He's in the House of Lords now, needless to say. And do you remember that fellow Carswell, Douglas Carswell, who was one of the sort of canaries down the coal mine of the absolute rubbishness of Brexit? Here's a selection of them talking about making promises to you.
Ridiculous report from some lobby group yesterday saying price of food will go up. It'll go down.
Our food bills would be lower. Our energy costs would be lower. Our tax bills would be lower.
Outside the EU, our food bills will be lower, our fuel bills will be cheaper, our taxes will be lower. I think people will be better off in terms of their household budgets.
So that's the reality of Brexit, completely contradicted by the promises made by three prominent Brexiters. Here is Keir Starmer's response yesterday to the mess that will be left behind by men like that.
I'm determined that Britain should profit from our strong global relationships. That means not just getting Brexit done, but making Brexit work. When I spoke at the CBI last November, I described how we would approach this. Making Brexit work is painstaking work, and slogans won't cut it. My goals will be to repair the alliances that this government has damaged.
It's quite interesting, you know. I mean, I obviously have to point out, saying slogans won't work in a speech containing the slogan "Make Brexit Work." Well, I mean, he didn't actually nail it down, right? But still, it's a slogan. Slogan plus Starmer equals what remains a question. A lot of love coming in for Richard, so much actually that it's tickling my ego, making me think that we should perhaps have given him less time. People seem to think his contributions to the programme so far were better than mine. And if you nod that vigorously, Keith, you'll do yourself an injury. Al's in Edinburgh. Al, what would you... Oh, there we go. The Scottish... one Scottish perspective. What do you make of it?
Right, well, Happy New Year first.
And to you too.
Quick sort of off-the-cuff thought.
Yes.
I support Starmer, but I think he shouldn't flog a dead horse by saying, make Brexit work, because Brexit can't work. I think it's also an emotive issue. So I think he's got to be fairly honest, apart from anything else that differentiates himself from Johnson.
Yes.
I think it's worth having a new arrangement with the EU, but simply cut and paste it, but just don't call it a European Union, because I think the union part of it is the emotive and sensitive part to many.
We're not officially members, but we are kind of...
Yeah, call it a European partnership. And so that means that Brexiteers can save face and Remainers get what they want.
That was, I think, one of the worst nails in the coffin of a damage limitation Brexit was probably that phrase Brino, that Brexit in name only, which a bit like let's go WTO. People shouted it in the streets without having the first idea what it meant. But it did enormous damage, didn't it, when people were told, no, they're not going to give you the real Brexit. Can't possibly tell you what the real Brexit is.
Yeah.
I think Nigel said it'll all depend on how fishermen get treated. That's the real test of Brexit, is fishing, which means by Nigel's measures, it's completely failed already. But that you're suggesting it would be a Brexit in name only. We just can't tell them that.
But I think they've just got to be honest about it.
I don't know how that works. I don't know enough even now about the makeup of it, because presumably you still, there are membership fees involved, which only apply to full members. So you mean an EEA or EFTA, that involves paying fees as well. That involves contributing to the overall costs, and that might be the tipping point, you see. As soon as cheques have to be signed, then the lunatic fringe of British politics has another hissy fit.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's a bad thing just to say, look, we made a wrong turn. Let's just come
People
back.
aren't ready yet. Might feel that way in Scotland. I don't think it. Well, because in Scotland they didn't make a wrong turn, did they? They got dragged in the wrong direction by England.
The only thing I would say is that I think Starmer needs to seek partnerships and even to campaign in partnership for PR. Maybe
you're the second caller to say that. And when you look at the polls, I mean, I don't want to leave Scotland out of it, given my second year of resolution not to. But Labour plus Lib Dem in a lot of constituencies offers up a very real opportunity of removing Conservative MPs. The Scottish question is obviously huge for Starmer. It won't be at the top of his to-do list. But what does he do? Given that it's going to be very hard for Labour to govern again without winning seats in Scotland, and at the moment the direction of traffic in Scotland is very much towards the SNP. 10:45 is the time. Al, thank you. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. Don't text me complaining that you can't get through. The minute I say goodbye to Al, it frees up a phone line for you. All you've got to do is dial 0345 6060 973. And I'll just read this from Gary, because it made me smile. It might make you smile as well. James, you really are a moron. The show isn't about you. It's for the callers. Thank you, Gary. Another happy listener to the James O'Brien experience. 10:48 is the time. Make Brexit work is not a slogan. I should say that again. Make Brexit work is not a slogan, because this is no time for slogans, says Keir Starmer, while essentially introducing the slogan Make Brexit Work into public discourse. But what does it mean? And how does it sound to you? 0345 6060 973. Kim's in Leeds. Kim, what would you like to say?
I think we ought to raise the issue of take back control, which was one of the big...
you just got a shiver then.
It's one of the slogans that we used, that people were voting for to leave the EU.
They were.
And I think the Labour Party, of which I'm a supporter, could genuinely say to the country, look, we hear what you say about wanting to take back control, and we're going to take that even further, and we're going to offer you, via proportional representation, a way of having your voice heard via your vote in an equal way right across the country. And I think that would acknowledge people's concerns about not having, control over their lives, if you like.
Yeah.
But I think it would pull in sort of Labour Party people, because I think they could support that. But hopefully the Conservatives, some of the Conservative voters would support that as well.
But I don't know that I agree with you, because partly perhaps because of the weird sort of sense of nausea that I had as the minute you said those words out loud, and the faces that it conjured up in my mind. But more pertinently, perhaps, who would we be who's got control at the moment? Because the reason why it worked in the context of Brexit was that it punted the myth that we were somehow other from the European. We weren't part of it. They were some sort of enemy that wished us harm, rather than an institution in which we played an epic and historical part. That lie worked very well, because it created an enemy in the minds of who's the enemy here that we're taking control back from?
Okay, I wouldn't say they were the enemy, but I think Westminster... I don't
He wants to be Prime Minister. He can't portray Westminster as the enemy.
But he could say genuinely, look, you're in some constituencies, your vote really doesn't count, whereas under under proportional representation, it would have a better weighting.
Back to this again. It's interesting, isn't it?
I think if you could, must be a skillful way of explaining how Parliament, it doesn't represent your views. I'm afraid I don't know enough about PR to be able to say...
No, that would be... I mean, they had their chance, of course. One of the most interesting elements of recent political history is that, although it wasn't proportional representation on the table, the electoral reform referendum that Nick Clegg secured in return for his soul, the campaign to reject that, the successful campaign to reject that, was led by a bloke called Dominic Cummings and another bloke called Matthew Elliott, who I believe his middle names are Tufton Street. I could be wrong about that. It might be something like John, but I think it's Matthew Tufton Street Elliott. You'd have to double check. And they kicked that one in the ghoulies as well a few years ago, but it doesn't mean you can't come back round again with proper PR on the table. It's interesting how many callers have mentioned that. 10:51 is the time. Kim, thank you very much. Grant's in Coatbridge. Grant, what would you like to say?
Good morning, James, and all the best for the new year, sir.
Same to you, sir. Thank you.
I remember Rupert Murdoch once saying that they don't do as they say, or they don't do as I say in Brussels, they ignore me in Brussels, but they do as they say in number 10.
Oh, yeah, did you know how boring I am? I have to tell you that although Anthony Hilton, the city editor of the London Evening Standard at the time, stands by that quote, Rupert Murdoch has denied it. Sorry.
Of course he will.
Yeah, well, precisely. Thank you. Carry on.
So, again, it's, in my opinion, being from Scotland, we voted 62% for Europe. I believe Mr Barnier has already told Nicola Sturgeon that he would welcome Scotland back, you know, if we did gain independence.
It's not got much to do with him anymore, possibly thankfully, but I take your point.
Yeah, obviously, in the past.
Yes.
So, again, with the Brexit thing, it's always the usual.
What the hell would that look like? What would that look like? We can't, I mean, you know, we've had to put a border in the Irish Sea. I don't want to put a border across the middle of Great Britain.
Well, Mr Johnson was wanting a bridge between Scotland and Ireland, wasn't he?
Yeah, he was, bless his little cotton socks. But that's the problem, isn't it, with the Scottish question, and it's one that we need to talk about more, in that if there is some future in which Scotland, an independent Scotland, rejoins, then all the problems that we have seen regarding Northern Ireland would be tenfold, wouldn't they?
Exactly, sir, exactly. Would that really make Brexit work?
Although if we were in EFTA, would we need a border? I need Kieran the van driver, but he's probably stuck in a massive queue somewhere in continental Europe at the moment. So make Brexit work to you means independent Scotland rejoining the European Union while England can go whistle.
Sir, it does indeed. And thank you. And thanks for your time. I'll let you go on with it.
Thank you for your time and for helping me keep my New Year's resolution to I know, I hope it doesn't sound patronising or silly, but remember Scotland when you're having these conversations. And, of course, Northern Ireland. I mean, crikey, I think Brexit's working in Northern Ireland. There you go. That might put a cat among the proverbial pigeons. I think your average dyed-in-the-wool unionist probably wouldn't like that observation, but Brexit seems to me to be the only place on the planet where Brexit is working. And why is it working? Because Northern Ireland's still in it, essentially. In all but name. Northern Ireland had Brino, Brexit in name only, and they're going great guns. I'm hearing now that vegetable and fruit and vegetable deliveries now arriving, and I have very, very good sources in this field, and the figure I'm being given at the moment is increases of between 10 to 15%. In fact, one of my sources on that used the word nuts to describe it, and I had to read it twice because I thought it was telling me about an increase in the price of nuts. But no, we're looking at vegetable prices now up 10 to 15% this morning on the stuff coming in from continental Europe. Should we play that little clip again of Jacob? I think perhaps we should. So I'm hearing from people in the green grocery trade that prices are up by 10 to 15% as a direct consequence of the new Brexit rules introduced at midnight on New Year's Eve. Here's Jacob.
Ridiculous report from some lobby group yesterday saying price of food will go up. It'll go down.
Our food bills will be low.
There you go. Oh, funny that. Charlie's in Linfield in West Sussex. Charlie, what would you like to say?
Hi, James.
Hello, Charlie.
You should never interrupt your enemy when he's making a mistake.
I like that.
It's not my quote, it's Napoleon. But, let the Tories own their mess, you know? I mean, it was only a few months ago I was sitting with my wife on the couch and we were looking at Twitter. And, you know, we have the same view. She's actually from Sweden.
Yes.
You know, she gets the commentary from over there. And it's the frustration of all this stuff not mainstreaming, you know.
It's not a great phone line, Charlie, so I'm going to hurry you up a little bit. You mean, why is the reality not landing more?
Why is the reality? And now it is.
Yes.
So let them make their mess.
And that's why David Frost has gone. I think we can be fairly confident that's exactly why David Frost has cleared off.
Exactly. And the thing is, the election is, a year and a half away? So we had to kind of think, well, you've got a year and a half. The first thing that has to happen is the Tories have got...
I'm going to leave it there. You made your point, but the phone line didn't match the quality of your contribution. The quality of the phone line did not match the quality of your contribution. 10:56 is the time. Tom's in Sudbury. Tom, what do you reckon?
Hi, James.
Hello, mate.
I find it interesting you're asking the question, and what does it mean to me? Well, it means something different to me to everybody else, and I think that's sort of the point of it. And it's a bit the same as Theresa May did with Get Brexit Done. No, Brexit means Brexit, and then Johnson did with Brexit Gets It Done. So he's sort of finding his own little slogan. But what I'm craving from Starmer is the definition that David gave earlier. Just give us something concrete to get onto and start working it around. If I can make a point, though, about the campaign piece, is should we start campaigning? The answer is yes, absolutely. But what do we mean by a campaign?
You mean campaign to rejoin? Again, as with the last lad, the phone line's not great, so I am going to hurry you slightly.
I'm sorry.
No, it's not your fault, unless you're the engineer responsible for your own line. So go on, just talk to me briefly about campaigning.
It's just an insight I had when on a Twitter spat with somebody, but just I think post-referendum, and I said the advantages of the European Union. This guy said, we get nothing from being in the European Union. And it really sent a chill through me that the campaign for what being in the Union gave us was a campaign which lasted, the campaign against it lasted for 30 years.
Yeah.
And so when we think about a campaign to rejoin the European Union, I think we need to start now, to start filling up the space, to start defining what it is. But it's just
you mean a soft campaign, a stealth campaign, and it's almost inspired by the words of Joni Mitchell, if I've understood you correctly. This is the you don't know what you've got till it's gone campaign.
Yes, absolutely.
And you just keep pointing out what's gone and also what has arrived in it that you didn't want. All of the red tape that arrives today. And amazingly, Kieran, the van driver who is clearly listening, has just sent me a photograph. He's currently parked up in Saint-Denis in France, but not, I stress, as far as I can tell, in a traffic queue, but I presume waiting for instructions because it has suddenly become considerably harder to bring in anything. We're even carrying adverts about it on this station. I mean, don't think that's ever happened before. Oh, what a load of old rubbish. That metropolitan elite, Ramona O'Brien, what's he talking about? I believe Jacob. Oh, my God, they're actually carrying adverts on his programme now, on the entire station, including... Are there any presenters on LBC who still think Brexit was a good idea? I should listen more, probably. But presumably they've got the adverts on their programmes as well. Presenters who said to you, it's going to be great, food will be cheaper. Come on, here's Jacob. Here's Daniel Hannan. Here's my mate Douglas Carswell. They've now got adverts on their own programmes telling you that it's become measurably and considerably harder to bring anything into the country from our closest neighbours. Well done, everybody.